Hello, my name is Pastor JB and I'm the elementary pastor at Light of Love Mission Church. Today we'll be discussing the topic, guiding the next generation to God. In today's day and age, many parents and teachers are concerned with the problem, how can I raise my child or student in a world that seems to stray away from God? Particularly in light of recent events and today's culture in general, this has become a prevalent issue, and one that we would like to address and seek answers to together. So to start, let me ask, what is your child's understanding of God? Chances are they'll know that God created us, loves us, and sent His Son Jesus to save us. But the next question will probably be, what's my child's understanding of God as they grow up? What will my child think of God as he or she becomes a youth student or a college student? What kind of exposure will they have to media, to different movies, to friends that might not be Christians, to questions that might cause them to doubt God's existence? So let's tackle some of these issues together. First of all, I'd like to ask, what are some of your child's interests or hobbies? See, starting from a toddler age to maybe the age of a teen, your child will develop these core hobbies or interests. And that is why many teachers and parents will agree that around that age, they should start learning an instrument, a fine art, or a sport, something that can get them to be interested in something that will create a core for that child, for that student. As they form that core, as they get better at that hobby, that'll become an avenue, a road in which they can use to glorify God as they get better and better at it. There's many students that are very talented musicians who are very good at basketball or tennis, and they get scholarships for that sport or for that instrument as they grow up into high school, as they volunteer for different things, as they go into college for those things. Or they'll develop various different skill sets to glorify God. Even when we look at a biblical example, Nehemiah, who was cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, he was also a builder who built the wall around Jerusalem. It's by encouraging our students to pursue their passions, their interests, their hobbies, that we can encourage them also to find ways to glorify God with these giftings, and to encourage them to do these things while thanking God for their giftings. Remind them every day. Remind them every day how gifted and talented they are, because God gave them those gifts, because God gave them those talents. To start, we can use giftings and talents to encourage them to seek after God. Next, I'd like to ask the question of media exposure. What kind of media is your child or student exposed to? The first exposure that many children, students have is through commercial content. Chances are their first exposure to unhealthy media content will be by maybe clicking on a thumbnail that's to a cartoon or to something that they love watching, but an ad from YouTube will come up. An ad or a pop-up will come up that can be completely unrelated to what they're watching. That will be their first exposure to something unhealthy, to something that can cause them to question, why is that person dressed this way? Or why is that person speaking this way? And that will be the seed of worry, the seed of doubt that causes them to stray away from God. So the first thing we can do really is filter out commercial content from their media. Secondly, a more obvious choice for us as parents and teachers is to expose them more to biblical stories, animations, such as VeggieTales or Superbook. But what about the more popular platforms, such as Disney and Pixar? A very common subscription for parents, teachers today is Disney Plus that we can use to show movies to our kids. But what about those articles that seem to suggest that even Disney and Pixar have unhealthy media content, of unhealthy exposure? Even movies rated PG seem to have some hidden innuendos that might not be healthy for our student or child. How can I know what's right for them? Ideally, as parents and teachers, we'll want to watch those movies before they do, watch those films or episodes before they do, but who has time to do that? The best choice really is to watch it with them. Parents, teachers, we should have at least one guardian or parent who can watch that film with the child, see their reaction, see how they respond to maybe some mild jokes, some crude humor that might be suitable for a PG-rated movie, and see how they respond to it. Ask them questions about it. What do they think about it? Or maybe see how they laugh at certain things, how they even joke with their friends. These are all signs, ways that we can see just how my child or student responds to these types of unhealthy exposure. So now that we've talked about media exposure, now that we've talked about these things, first of all, parents, teachers, I'd like to remind you that you know your student best. You know your child best. So exposing them to these things one step at a time, or to ask them questions about these things, do so in your own discernment with prayer and wisdom. Now lastly, we're going to be talking about the question of asking the hard questions. By the time your child or student is a youth group age, they'll start asking questions about if God did this or why God did this. Maybe they'll start asking at a late elementary age too. This type of questioning doesn't start at a specific age group. It can even start from elementary. So, what if my relative died? What if my dog died? If God was real, why does He allow death to happen? Why does He allow suffering in the world? Why does evil exist? They might start asking these kinds of questions, and things don't become so black and white anymore. To look at some biblical examples of these questions, we can easily look at the story of Job. Job was a man who was so righteous in the eyes of God that God actually allowed Satan to test him. You can see that in the first chapter of Job. And we can see the life of Job as he struggled with all the different things that happened and the conversations he has with the friends and so on and so forth. Refer to Job as an example of a man who was righteous in the eyes of God. And evil things happened to him. A lot of things happened to him that might cause us to question, why this? Why is this happening to me? Why is life so unfair? Romans is another excellent way to look at sin, or we can look at evil. Romans is full of such rich theology of what sin is about. And by studying Romans, parents, teachers, we can begin to give an answer to these students about the reason for evil, the reason for suffering. The first few chapters of Romans talks about sin. And as the chapters progress into the later chapters, up to chapter 12, it starts with verse 1 in chapter 12. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to present yourself as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing, acceptable to God. For this is your true and proper worship. Verse 2 continues, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your minds. For this is God's will for you, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. And those first two verses of chapter 12 is a culmination, is a continuation of the past 11 chapters. Understanding the sin, understanding reconciliation, understanding all these different topics, the rich theology of sin. Our response to sin and evil is we ought to present our bodies as living sacrifices, worshiping the Lord, understanding even amidst all the evil and suffering, there is a proper understanding of this in what the scriptures teach us. Let's look to the Bible, parents, teachers. Finally, I'd like to remind us as parents and teachers, as individuals who shepherd different groups of people, different age groups, we must intentionally spend time with our students, with our children, so that they know how loved they are. They know the right way to God. They know the paths of righteousness. As they look to you, at their role models, parents, teachers, let's set the example for them so that they know who God is. They know that He is real, so that they know how to go to God. The best way to guide the next generation to God is to spend that time intentionally with them, to pray for them, to be there for them when they ask these questions. And let's not forget what it says in 1 Peter 3:15, to always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that we have in Christ Jesus. Let's strive forward together and guide the next generation to God.